Hum 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 hum. Hum 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 hum. Hum 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 hum. Very upsetty. Hello, hellos, Flintoos. Why are you gray on my phone? It's so weird. Like, I can see you're green on my computer, but whatever. You're gray to my phone right now, so... Yeah, your name is Gray for some reason. Hold up, let me view it like... Yeah, no, it's still gray. Okay. Well, you're gray and I'm gray. We're all sad. Because I'm gonna have to stop at like 8 p.m. because I need to catch another stream. And then I need to catch another stream after that. My day has been super bored in the morning because I woke up at 4 a.m. for some reason. Listen, I went to bed at like 12 a.m. and then I woke up at 4 for some reason and I could not go back to sleep. I tried really hard. I tried so hard to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. And I think it's because I had a nightmare. I'll go over my nightmare real quick because it's very important. So in my nightmare, I was on a boat. And the boat, it was like a ship. And I had to like, it was like really dark and shit. And there's like some creepy stuff going on or something. I don't know. It was like a puzzle ship. It was like very 999-esque in that it was kind of full of puzzles, but not really puzzles. And one of the puzzles was like this fuse breaker thingy. And you had to like adjust it in just the right way, otherwise things will go to heck. So at the very end of the dream, after I did all the puzzles and everything was great and we're about to leave maybe, the fuse breaker went off and then someone told me, hey, go fix it. And I'm like, why are you telling me to fix it? I'm freaking out. And they were like, no, you have to fix it. I'm busy doing something. I don't know. So I went and fixed it, but I didn't fix it because I couldn't see anything. And I couldn't see the colors and the codes and stuff. And I was like, no. So I pressed a button and I was like, please let it be the right one. But it wasn't. And then something went and started chasing me. And I opened the door and it was full of people. But then the monster grabbed me and then I woke up. And I think that's why I couldn't go to sleep. I think I was also very hungry. So maybe I couldn't go to sleep because I was very hungry. Anyway, that's my nightmare, so let's continue this game. Looky, we've done the house in Fata Morgana. We've done Over Queen for Innocence. We've done Reincarnation. Now we just need the short stories. I'm so excited. Look at this art. Ooh. I don't know if it's gonna be like a visual novel-y or if it's just gonna be straight up novels. I see that skelly man. That's Morgs. I've never gone into this menu. We're jumping right in. The vast majority of happenings in this world are not recorded in stories, either too trifling to add in or adding no meaning to our lives. These facts of life are coldly cast aside with only the tiniest sliver of deeming worthy enough. Tales afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. Short stories. Oh! Achievement got. There's quite a few. Oh. So apparently some of these actually initially were in... Like, some of these were in Requiem for Innocence, the PC version, which I'm gonna have to go over. I'm gonna have to go through the PC version, because there's, like, specifically for the backstage. I just really want to see the backstage for Requiem. But all of the short stories that were in there, because there were some extra ones that we didn't get in, this, but they're in here, in this short story section. But there's also a bunch of other ones, too. But yeah. I guess we should just start with the beginning. We'll see how many we can get through today. I only have like 2 hours, so let's go for it. Let's just go. Yeah. Okay, so it's gonna be just a straight up story kind of thing. What happened after the white-haired girl's disappearance in the Era of Roses? Oh. Find a comfy voice. Yeah, we'll just read it in our normal voice. I sipped some water, so I should be fine. I'll just turn this up so it can face me. Alright. Let's do this. The maid spoke little of what happened after the white-haired girl's disappearance in the Era of Roses, for she believed the rest of the tale insignificant, of no value to share with her listener, the white-haired girl herself. Thus, her role as storyteller ended with the girl's departure from the stage. While the other character stories continued on, they were cut from the script, afforded not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. A slow-killing poison. Arthur Baldwin was vexed. Shortly before they were to be married, his engagement with Nellie Rhodes, eldest daughter of the Rhodes family, had been broken off. He understood well enough why it had happened, and had it been his decision, he likely would have made the same one. So Arthur's dissatisfaction lay not with the dissolution itself, nor did he bear any fault in it. His bride-to-be had simply been gripped by madness. I hear she attacked Abigail. An Abigail? Oh? I was told that she took one of her eyes out. Even worse, she killed her. Those are but rumors, my dears. The truth is so much more dreadful. I used to work at the Rhodes Manor, you see. And the young lady, she... Initially, Arthur was skeptical of what people were saying. He assumed the tales were being exaggerated as they spread. But when the head of the Rhodes family came personally to deliver reparations and formally nullified the engagement, he gave Arthur a rough overview of what had happened. It was apparently true that Nellie had assaulted an Abigail. And it was true that she spent most of her time in her room now, looking pale and sickly, drained of her spirits. And then, when he had said outright a demon's possessed her, Arthur had little choice but to believe something wasn't right. And to top it off, Nellie's older brother Mel ran off to become a priest, presumably to get away from everything. Nellie's father implored Arthur to remain discreet about her situation, not that he had any intention of going around and spreading personal details about her life. However, rumors have a nasty way of slipping through the tiniest of cracks, sneaking about through the dark like a seasoned cat burglar. What nobles like to refer to as social gatherings were in practice more like gossip gatherings, and in short order, the Rhodes family's eldest daughter was the talk of high society. Incidentally, the painter whose downfall eventually culminated into this tragedy was also strangled by the noble Grapevine, though Arthur had no way of knowing as much. Perhaps the painter's curse extended beyond the girl's hair color, and the Rhodes family was destined to be brought to ruin by the gossip of their fellow aristocrats. One evening, Arthur decided he would sneak into the Rhodes Manor. He had requested visitations with Nellie on numerous occasions, but he'd been turned away every time. She's in no condition for company, was what they kept telling him, which left him no choice but to see her uninvited. The aroma of the roses seemed more overpowering at night than during the day, and he wasn't sure whether it was just his imagination. The nagging irritation it caused in him, however, not only in his mind. Arthur instructed his coachman to wait on a street a little ways out, and made the rest of the way to the manor on foot, entering through the garden. As he waded through the sea of roses, he clenched his teeth. Arthur preferred restraint when it came to both gardening and girls. What am I doing with my life? How did I end up here, sneaking about, trying to find that obnoxious little girl's room? Arthur had few pleasant memories of this rose garden. The Rhodes and Baldwins had a long history, so as a child, he would often find himself left here to play with the adults while the adults did business. It was him, Nellie, who could never seem to stop hanging off her brother, and Mel, the textbook definition of a well-behaved aristocrat boy. Not only had he managed to step into the siblings' private world, there was only room for the two of them. Oh, not once had he managed to, leaving Arthur stuck out there all by himself. The best he could manage was a little teasing now and then. For example, saying her hair looked like the color of fallen leaves. I never asked for this engagement anyway. Who would even want to marry a girl who thinks herself some kind of princess? Not me, that's for sure. But still, he had known her practically his whole life. Of course he was going to be curious when people were saying she had gone mad or been possessed by a demon. He was just curious, he told himself as he drew nearer to Nellie's window. The curtains appeared to be drawn. He couldn't see anything inside. So he crouched down to pick up a few pebbles to toss over the veranda. A few soft taps rang out in the night before the curtain finally shifted. A few moments later, a young girl stumbled out into the moonlight. Despite already knowing the answer, his first thought was, "Who's that?" He wanted to smack himself, but at the same time, it was hard to deny the discrepancies between the girl standing there and the girl of his memories. The moonlight seemed to give her flaxen hair a ghostly bluish tint. It fluttered in a passing breeze, and Arthur felt something about her he had never had before. She's so pretty. Whoa, slow down. What's wrong with you? Pretty? That self-centered, spoiled little brat. There wasn't a trace of the rambunctious Nellie he knew to be found. She stood there by the veranda railing, gazing vaguely off into space like a pensive spirit. It wasn't at all what Arthur had expected to see when he came calling. He assumed she would be nothing but skin and bones, haggard and unsightly. Now, Lady Nellie, do you not think it rude to not at least greet me? We were engaged, as you might recall. Her eyes still unfocused, Nellie turned her gaze down towards where Arthur stood. It was a reaction, but still he felt as though she had snubbed him, which did little to alleviate the irritation building up since he had arrived. Look, it's like a scene right out of your beloved Romeo and Juliet. Not that I'm here enthusiastically, of course. Mumbling complaints to himself, Arthur climbed a nearby tree, leaping from a branch onto the veranda. And there she was, within arm's reach but as distant as ever. Still, he could see nothing in her eyes. Hello? Say something already, would you, Nellie? Perhaps she really had lost her mind, just not in the way he had been led to believe. Arthur spent a few moments pondering how to proceed. He didn't consider himself a model gentleman like Mel, not even slightly, but he wasn't so crass as to laugh it off either. You certainly are quiet tonight, aren't you? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to act when you're like a completely different person. Every time you open your mouth, I want to sew it shut. You're always complaining. Nothing's ever good enough for you. But right now, I just want you to say something. anything. How am I supposed to know what's going on through your head if you don't tell me? Or is there just nothing at all? Nellie's gaze glided past Arthur into the rose garden behind him. Nellie, are you listening to me? He tried again and again to get her attention, calling her name, waving his hand in front of her face, gently tugging on her hair. But all his attempts were fruitless. She simply stood there, lifeless, a well-crafted doll. He wasn't sure exactly how to describe how he felt. Slightly unsettled to start, a bit of pity to go with it, a great deal of something yanking at his insides. Arthur had few pleasant memories with the Rhodes. That didn't mean he wanted to erase his past with them entirely, though. But looking at her, this empty shell, he felt almost as though those days were disappearing with her. How irritating. One sec, it's raining and I need to close the back door. I'm hearing, like, thuddings. This is really interesting. I did not think we'd go and investigate Arthur. One sec. Alright, I'm back. That's crazy. It's like still sunny outside, but it suddenly decided to rain heavily. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how much they really like to have you see different sides of characters that are supposedly very one note. I wonder what's gonna happen here. I guess I was really curious what happened to Nellie, but let's see. He knew the word wasn't right, but he went with it anyway, heaving a sigh after letting it linger in the air for a moment. It's always been like this. I'm no more than a buzzing insect to you. I can't stand this dreadful rose garden. It was exhausting having to come here again and again just because our families are close. I would try to say something, but you'd go running off in your darling brother's arms. Dear smell this, dear smell that, but all you know how to say. And he would just give you a half-hearted smile and pretend to be sorry for not paying attention to you. Arthur looked out over the garden as well. He was more talking to himself than he was to Nellie. I'm sure you don't remember, but one time I even brought you flowers. What were they? Some kind of anemone, I think. But you wouldn't take them. You said the roses here were prettier, so you didn't need my flowers. What a miserable day that was. But standing beside this silent spectre, melancholy overwhelmed any anger or frustration he might have otherwise felt. Perhaps it was because nothing he had said managed to elicit any reaction out of her. Or perhaps because he wished he had come out and said this all sooner. Unless expressed, feelings merely fester. I don't care one bit about you, and I mean that. It's only ever been about doing what's best for my family. Of course, Nellie was a perfect example of why you couldn't let everything out either. The gossip spoke not only of her attacking an Abigail, but of her destroying her relationship with her brother. And that was likely what had done the most damage. Knowing what he knew of Nellie in her younger days, Arthur had little trouble believing what the rumors said. That her affection for Mel went far beyond simple familial love. It was for my family, but that doesn't mean I wasn't going to try to get along with you. You probably don't believe me, since I certainly never acted like it, but I genuinely did want us to be on good terms. It's just, you had to be the one who changed first. You were always treating me like I was worthless, like I meant nothing to you. Not like any of that would have even left an impression in your one-track mind, of course. That's why I wanted you to take the first step. I'm not some wise old monk who can just turn my frustration off on command. Arthur let out another sigh. Do you think anything would have gone differently if I could have been more grown up? Gusts of wind blew through, sending up a flurry of rose petals, carrying them up past the two of them and through the velvet curtains into Nellie's bedchamber. A faint smile crossed her lips. Arthur could only guess at what was going through her mind, what was reflected in her eyes. In her room, he could see several pairs of small children's shoes, a doll with its hair all neatly made up, a pile of sheet music drawn up for her by a respected composer years earlier, toys carved from wood. It was like he was looking through a window into the past. That was all he needed to know. He could have treated her like the princess she thought she was. She would have gone down the same path. Nellie's eyes were on one person only. Arthur wasn't even a shadow on her peripheral. Your brother's still smiling for you in there, isn't he? And that was all she needed. After that night, Arthur stayed away from the roads and never mentioned the siblings again. It was the best thing to do, he thought. He had his own life to worry about. But fate wouldn't allow him to avoid hearing about the family from time to time. About 4 years later, Nellie, who had apparently fallen ill, passed away at the young age of 18. The Rhodes held a small funeral service, which Mel did not attend. Arthur couldn't even begin to imagine what he, her brother, felt about it. But another 3 years later, Mel followed behind her. At the age of 24, he threw himself off the top of a church tower. According to those near him, he had been acting unusual in the months leading up to his death, claiming he could hear a woman's voice talking to him. If he had taken his life out of grief, 3 years seemed like too long of a gap. Perhaps it had built up over time and that was how long it took to reach the boiling point. But that's not how it felt to Arthur. It felt like Mel had been guided there by a higher power, or maybe pushed. And there was one other strange detail. He had died at exactly the strike of noon, as the bell rang its 12th toll. Well, that was depressing. Oof. I can see why Toast mentioned that we should do some of these stories early if we prefer, because that's just unfortunate. Yeah, Arthur moved on. I mean, you can imagine most people in around them lived a decent life. Maybe not the best, but you know, they got to move on. They weren't cursed. But then you hear about the other people. Defectives. I see that moon. I mean, immediately thinking Imian. Or not, never mind. It's Yukimasa. I saw the moon, got excited. In the distant Oh, jeez. Oh, no. I am an Englishman trying to pronounce difficult words. Bear with me. None of these are going to be correct. In the distant Hoei era, while the Tokugawa shogunate governed feudal Japan, Yukimasa Ida made his living far to the west, with little knowledge for what lay beyond the borders of his own native country. The land of the rising sun was an isolated nation, turning nearly everyone away save for traders from a few specific regions. And those restrictions applied equally to Japanese who had departed to the country before they were put in place. Yukimasa was a third-generation immigrant, having never once set foot in his homeland. For that reason, as a child he held a great adoration for the glorious nation described by his grandfather. He was particularly fond of the katana passed down to him by his grandfather. Though it bore no name, the blade had curiously bestial glimmer that entranced Yukimasa at first sight. The katana had belonged to Yukimasa's grandmother, but she had passed away before he was born. His grandfather described her as a skilled swordswoman, slight in frame but easily able to take down several men more than twice her size. After his grandfather passed and bequeathed unto him the blade, Yukimasa would from time to time see phantoms of a young woman drenched in blood. She had sharp, narrow eyes like him that looked more like his than even his parents. He felt almost as though his own reflection had stepped out of the mirror to cut him down. Or like they were a pair of killers standing shoulder to shoulder. With each recurrence of the illusion, it took root even deeper into his soul, and Yukimasa grew ever more certain that one day he would cross over into her world. That he was simply holding in his true nature, that the beast dwelling within would break loose eventually. This tale, however, is of a time when he was still more man than beast. Defectives. In the wake of framing and killing 2 crewmates for smuggling Spanish silver, Yukimasa was having something of an identity crisis. On both occasions, he had been smiling during the act. At least according to those who had seen him. If what they had said were true, he wasn't conscious of it, but he didn't particularly doubt their words either. It was in all likelihood true. He had killed 2 men and enjoyed doing it. What unsettled Yukimasa most, though, was that his initial reaction was, I wonder what I'm going to become. Not a moment's concern for the men whose lives he had stolen. Once their still warm bodies hit the water, that was that. He held no nostalgia for the months they had spent out at sea together. He didn't care what kind of men they had been, how much their families might grieve over the loss. Yukimasa wondered if that made him narcissistic. The lack of interest in anyone but himself seemed to fit the bill, but he didn't actually feel like he held himself in very high stature. He simply had this vague awareness of himself as a twisted, unsightly creature. On that day, the ship stopped at a small port town to replenish supplies and give the crew a few days to stretch their legs. They were still about 2 months out from Amsterdam, where his beloved awaited his return. Alright, so this is... the Bestia time. What a hellish trip that was. The crewmen, of Western origin, naturally muttered. If I never have to hear the word smuggle again, it'll be too damn soon. The way the whole crew's got their cheeks clenched after that's about driven me mad. Not blaming you, I mean. That's just how it is. Yukimasa shook his head and gave the man a faint smile. In his mind, he chuckled about how no one could seem to see through his mask. The blame lay with him for much more than just the tension on the ship. Real shit job you got stuck with there. I don't know if I'd have been able to do it and, keep a straight face like you did. Bet you're aching to let off some steam, ain't you? You can be straight with me. I could certainly stand for some relief, yes. That much was true. However, Yukimasa meant it in a very different way. Come with me tonight, then. I know the perfect place to get you just what you need. Oh no. The town seaman smirked, which was all Yukimasa needed to know what he was insinuating. He hesitated to come up with a response. Worried about Captain and Osama? Don't. I ain't gonna tell him. Besides, it's not like he doesn't have needs too, you get me? Some of the crew knew that Yukimasa was romantically involved with the captain's daughter. The man standing before him seemed to assume his hesitation stemmed from that. But Captain Osama would, as the seafarer had said, spend his time off satisfying his personal needs. That was just part of the life on sea. Everyone understood and no one considered it to be unfaithful. Requiring a ship full of vigorous young men to save themselves for their partners, who they would often not see for months at a time, could in fact be considered a form of torture. There were a number of brothels scattered about the port town. For them, sailors were practically the ideal clients. The ship only stayed around for a few days to a week, meaning no time to get attached or cause other similar problems. About the only complaint a prostitute might have is the sailors tended to be quite pent up. They weren't the kind of client a new recruit could generally handle. That settles it. Tonight. Grab something to eat, and then we'll meet up at... Yukimasa forced a smile for the man who had taken his silence as a yes. But he wasn't worried about Captain Osama finding out or being unfaithful to Pauline. He simply wasn't sure how much he could trust the seaman's recommendation. The last thing he wanted was to catch some kind of disease. Yukimasa was paired up with a skeletal girl with faded brown hair, which she had done up so much it only served to emphasize the lack of anything elsewhere on her body. This is your idea of the perfect place. He couldn't deny his disappointment at his assignment, who boasted absolutely nothing of what he sought in a woman. In fact, he was afraid he might snap her in half. As the other pairs heated up beyond the thin curtains, Yukimasa's interest plummeted. Did I put the warning right? Yes. If a woman tried to seduce him, he would act in accordance with his base instincts, but otherwise, Yukimasa didn't have a particularly strong libido, so... You're not into this at all, are you? No, It's fine. You're not gonna hurt my feelings if you want to trade me for another girl. I used to have a few regulars, but these days I've got nothing. Sooner or later, they're gonna toss me out of my ass, and I'll have to resort to back alley quickies to make a living. You're the customer, you've got every right to complain to the manager about drawing the short straw. She sounded like a woman hanging from her last thread. I'm not going to cause any trouble for you. Well, aren't you sweet? Your loss, she said with a snicker. I object to being called sweet, but anyway. I stand out more than most, so if I make a scene, it's more likely to escalate. You even went out of your way to explain yourself, so I object your objection. But you do have a point. You're from the Far East, aren't you? Don't see many of your kind around these parts. It's no surprise you draw attention. You know what? I've changed my mind. Don't ask for another girl. Clients like you only come around once in a blue moon. I'd rather not let you go. Let's both avoid making a fuss and stay here together. You make it sound like I'm some kind of exotic animal. Aha! You're cute when you scowl. We can find out if you're an animal later, but you certainly are exotic. You're not even going to pretend this is a business exchange anymore, are you? I mean, why bother? I'm just the leftover scraps that nobody wanted. There was something oddly charming about her gleeful laugh combined with the streams of self-deprecation, which would have been less of an issue for Yukimasa had he become physically intimate with Pauline yet. Because by comparison, this prostitute would look like nothing more than a couple dried twigs tied together. But he wouldn't be able to see Pauline for another couple months. And he was beginning to think this girl might just do the trick for now. Their ship was scheduled to stay in port for about a week. Although they would have to spend some time moving cargo on and off the boat, the stay was, by and large, a recreational one. It was early afternoon, and while much of the crew had gathered together to go drinking, Yukimasa was taking a relaxed walk along the shore. He was no less interested in exploring the unfamiliar port town as anyone else, but unlike them, he wasn't the kind of man whose first instinct was to go straight to the pub. They all jabbed at him for being stiff and tight-assed, none the wiser to the primal urges he kept buried within. And who would ever suspect it either? Who could watch him walk up to an elderly man fishing on the dock, ask, "How's the catch?" with a smile, and imagine a bloodthirsty beast lurked within? The man gave a lazy nod in return, adding, "Ain't half bad today." "You're a sailor, I wager, am I right?" the man said as Yukimasa made to resume his walk. "You are." Well, a warning to you then, outsider. You best stay away from any back alleys after dark. Oh. Should he now? It ain't safe at night, nohow. Yukimasa gave the man a half smile, feeling somewhat patronized by his warning. He was plenty capable of discerning where the dangerous parts of town were, and he was confident in his ability to defend himself if someone tried to attack. There's already been several victims. Yukimasa froze. As in, murders. Killed deader and dead. And they still ain't caught him neither. Wouldn't want any of our guests to end up next on the list. Out of curiosity, how does he kill? The old man turned his gaze down, his face becoming a shadow against the clear blue ocean stretching out behind him. He dismembers him. Ooh. Hard to imagine, eh? Cutting a person into a bunch of pieces. He don't discriminate neither. Man, woman, child, don't matter none. He's a sicko, a complete madman. And they ain't found no pattern to the victims neither. Nothing to say who he might be or who we might choose next. So don't think you're safe just because you're not from around here. Yukimasa could feel his vision narrowing, converging on a single point. Oh, he could imagine. He could imagine clear as the afternoon sky. And oh, how he wished that could be. Well, look who it is. Fancy running into you here. What? Who's this? Fancy running into you here. Is it her? A woman's voice dragged him back to reality. He felt like he had just been pulled up from the bottom of the ocean. When he turned to face her, he must have still looked a bit dazed, judging from the way she raised her eyebrow at him. Oh, let me guess. You don't recognize me, not all made up for work. It's me, the girl from yesterday. She held her hair up in an approximation of her previous night's hairstyle, to which Yukimasa gave an ah in feigned realization. So what are you doing wandering around out here? Bored? Got nothing better to do? He wondered if the woman was even capable of being less blunt, especially considering he had technically been her client the night before. I'm just taking a walk. Not much to see out here. There's the ocean. Don't you get enough of that when you're on it? I'll never tire of the sight of the sea. Is that so? She said, followed by a soft, slightly exasperated, I'll never understand guys. But a few seconds later, she gave him a big smile. So hey, you're not busy. Why don't you come to my place? I can throw together a bare bones little lunch. Again, I'm taking a walk. And bare bones is hardly a convincing sales pitch. I'm saying, if you want a quality meal, pony up for some goods. Ah, so that was what she meant. Apathetic but finding no reason to turn her invitation down, Yukimasa agreed to go along. I've taken a liking to you, she had said. Stop by whenever you've got the chance, at least until you have to take off. I can treat you even better than when I'm on the job, free of charge. What do you have to lose? So that's exactly what Yukimasa did. Seeing her became part of his daily routine. The more time they spent together, the more he learned about her. She had once been married and planning to start a family. Money troubles led to debt piling on, which led to her husband running out on her. With the entirety of their debt on her shoulders, she had to start working, which was how she ended up at the brothel. As she told her story, Yukimasa showed a fair degree of sympathy, but took the whole thing with a grain of salt. If everything she said was true, she'd had a hard life indeed, but there was no guarantee it was. Yukimasa made certain not to be openly dismissive or skeptical, though, to play the good listener. There was one thing he could be certain of, though. He felt a tiny bit of solidarity in this woman's solitude. The sense she was missing something. The sense she had a hunger. The sense she had a hole that couldn't be filled. The sense that she was defective. You know, we get on pretty well, don't you think? Maybe you and I could... You could, I don't know, take me as your mistress. Oh, gasp, he would never. She sounded like she was only playing around, but still he responded with, It's not wise to pair two defectives together. What's that supposed to mean? She said with a scowl. Something that is interesting about him, which I've noticed, is he can't have two tethers at the same time. Oh, one sec. I'm gonna BRB. Alright, I'm back. I got some more water. Take care of some stuff. Okay. Yukimasa's ship was to depart the following day. That evening, that woman asked him to stay the night, to which he was unsure how to react. Don't you have work? I'll just say I wasn't feeling well. It's not like anyone wants me there. But don't you need the... I can survive taking one day off. Don't I want to be with you? And with that, he could come up with no further objections. Regardless of what he did, he would be heading back out to sea the following day, likely never to see the woman again. So rather than waste time debating her own life choices, it would be easier for everyone if he just let her do as she pleased. Tomorrow, none of it would be his concern, after all. He agreed, and she gave him a big smile in response. I'm gonna make you a feast tonight, she said. You're paying, though. Yukimasa wondered, perhaps, what she wanted most was to play like they were a real family. That was probably it. What she was missing in her life wasn't love or romance, but someone to sit around the table and enjoy a meal with. That raised a new question. What happened after she'd had her fun? What happened? What? She found someone to fill the hole in her spirit, but it was fake, and the hole wouldn't stay filled forever. Oh. I'm doing something terribly cruel to her, aren't I? There was nothing he could do about that anymore, though. Even if she were to ask him to stay, he didn't have that option. May I ask you something? He said. Yeah? How did it feel when you lost your family? Your sanctuary? You sure know how to go right for the heart. I apologize. I don't want to think about anything that might bring my mood down. If you want to know what it feels like, experience it for yourself. Find yourself a girl and get her to run off on you. Seemingly taking his silence for discomfort, the woman let out a soft laugh and said, I don't want you to have to go through that. Supper was a seafood stew. Hardly a feast, but there was a homely warmth to the meal. Something she had likely honed over the years. When a man is incomplete, missing a vital part of what makes him human, what becomes of him? Does he lash out? Does he lose the will to live? Does he forget what kind of man he is? Yukimasa didn't think he fit into any of those categories. In the middle of the night, Yukimasa silently slipped out of bed and made his way for the door. Wait. But he didn't make it 2 steps before the woman grabbed him by the sleeve. She must have been awake the whole time. There was no way she could have noticed him leaving otherwise. Don't do this to me. I've had more than enough of waking up to an empty bed. I'm not going to let it happen again. Not this time. You may think sneaking off without a word is the cleanest way to end things, but you're wrong. Stay until morning. Let me say a proper goodbye. No, I wasn't. You weren't what? Of course you were. I don't care if you think me a free tale for the week. You're just gonna forget about when it's over. I'm using you for my own personal satisfaction too. The one thing I won't stand for is you just up and disappearing on me. You're not the one being left behind. You don't understand how worthless and pathetic that makes you feel. It hurts. It hurts so much more than anything else you could do. Don't leave me. That was probably what she wanted to say more than anything else. The loneliness that had created the hole in her heart was making waves, and this was the real desire that lay hidden in her words. She didn't want to be alone anymore.
I'm not leaving. I'll be back. There's something I wanted to give you. I was going to get it.
And what would that be?
It's my way of showing gratitude.
I think the word you're looking for is present.
Yes, that.
Her eyes were locked with Yukimasa's. She was staring through the darkness in an attempt to ascertain how truthful he was being. About 10 or 15 seconds of glaring, she let him go.
I won't be long,
he said with a smile. He's off to get ahead. And then spook her off. As he walked down the moonlit port, Yukimasa's mind raced. No one truly understands themselves more than superficially. Some say you know yourself best, others say it's quite the opposite. The concept of self is full of uncertainties, contradictions. Yukimasa suspected he was suppressing himself with his self. While he had a reasonable grasp on who his outer self was, his inner self was a complete mystery. And that fact sometimes sent a chill down his spine. Who was he? What did he want in life? Which self? Which of his desires was the real him? Self, 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 self. He felt sick. About 30 minutes later, he was back. Within seconds of him knocking on the woman's door, it was open. She must have been waiting there, anxious for his return. The woman met his eyes, gave him a pouty smile, and then slowly lowered her gaze. It's a head, it's a head, it's a head! Her eyes gradually widened, shooting up and down as they did. I've never been very good about thinking of anyone other than myself.
I consider myself proficient enough at conversation, but if I'm not careful, my mind always seems to drift back to myself instead of focusing on who I'm talking to. That said, I've spent a great deal of time thinking about you.
The woman took a step back. Yukimasa followed.
And I've concluded this is the best way for me to make you happy.
Did he bring his sword? Going to kill her. She didn't have time to let out a shriek. There was only the sound of steel slicing flesh, metal grinding against bone. As the nameless katana pierced the woman's breast, her mouth flapped open and shut, while her eyes were held wide open, fixed on the man standing before her. Faint gasps escaped her lips and sputters. Perhaps she wanted to scream. Perhaps she wanted to cry and shout and say this wasn't what she wanted. There wasn't enough strength left in her emaciated body to do either. As blood spilled down the sides of her lips, she muttered one last scrap of her strength. And with it she forced out her parting words, carefully chosen and enunciated to ensure he heard every last one.
You pitiful man. Kind of hopeless fool would throw their life away just to kill a worthless prostitute.
She cursed him as her life slipped away. Yukimasa, however, let out a laugh and muttered,
Don't you worry. I still have enough control to not act sheerly on impulse.
Hey, Yukimasa? You hear about that whore you've been banging? She was killed last night, cut to pieces like the others. I swear it's like trouble follows you wherever you go. It's crazy. Lord almighty, stay away from me, man. I don't want to catch the attention of whatever evil spirit's taken a liking to you. That was probably best. He would be safer keeping his distance. Yukimasa gazed idly out of the port town as it faded out of view. He then turned towards the ocean, the vast, familiar blue expanse. The waves against the boat sounded vaguely like splashing blood.
Can I ask you something, Pauline? Yukimasa said in the warm embrace of his sweetheart. Anything. What would you think if I were actually an unspeakably evil man? Huh? Where'd that come from? She asked with a smile, evidently assuming the question was in jest. Idle curiosity. Well, bad people come in all shapes and forms. What sorts of bad things would you do? How about committing murder? Deceiving people. The words that came from Yukimasa's mouth were not the ones he'd prepared to say, which came as a surprise even to him. Why had he not been able to say what he had wanted? What reason could he possibly had? Did he not want to raise any suspicions? No, that wasn't it. Is being dishonest really evil? Sure, it's bad if you lie to cheat someone out of their money or cause them pain, but no one's perfectly honest with everyone they meet. I try to be straightforward and truthful as best as I can, but I'm sure I slip up from time to time. So listen to me, Yukimasa. Pauline gave a wide, infinitely loving smile. Even if you have something to hide, something you're ashamed to tell me, that won't change how I feel about you. You got nothing to worry about. Besides, I plan to be with you for years and years to come. You want to know what my life's dream is? I'd love to. My dream is to live out a long, quiet life with you. Oh. I don't need anything extravagant, just an ordinary life, slowly growing older, having 3, maybe 4 children. We'd never fight, and eventually before I knew it, I'd be an old lady thinking, it was an uneventful life, but it was the best I could have asked for. That's the life I want. What about you? Now he understood. He didn't want to risk cracking the foundation she provided him, the sanctuary she formed around him. Yes, I too wish for a peaceful life with you. Do you now? So I did Mel, well, Roses, then the Beast. I would say this would be Yaki, but I'm talking about painting, so this one might be George's. Let's see. Oh, the painting's ramblings. Why, hello there, Giselle. Doing your rounds again? Such a diligent young lady you are. You could get away with cleaning this whole place once every couple decades and no one would be the wiser. What? You're not Giselle? That's someone else. Oh no, you're just the maid. And who am I, you ask? Well, this is quite the pickle. What on earth could have happened while I was dozing off? You think you're just a maid, and you think you're the witch at the same time? You've forgotten just about everything. I don't think anything I say is gonna fix that. You do seem a bit mellower now, and not so constantly miserable. Wasn't sure what to say to you before, or if I should say anything at all. So I didn't say much out of consideration for you. Not that you could really tell from looking at me, I guess. If forgetting takes some weight off you, then maybe it's for the best. Not that I think you should forget, and not that I want you to forget about Michel. I won't blame you for choosing not to spend God knows how much longer agonizing over it. Poor Georges. He's just been watching Giselle slowly go crazy and also being asleep. nothing wrong with abandoning ship, especially considering how long you've spent on it. And hey, it hurt me too seeing you in so much pain, so we both come out on top here, I guess. What kind painting, you say? Well, thank you kindly. But the truth is, I'm not nearly as upstanding a guy as people think I am. And it was us Bollingaires that turned your life upside down and caused you all that misery and suffering. Yeah, I know. The first dumbfounded smile was testament enough. Everything I say is going in one ear and out the other. Which means I'm free to say whatever I want. By the time tomorrow's rolls around, you'll have forgotten all about the curious talking painting you chanced upon today. So I'll start with this. It's a huge relief to see you smiling again. It's not the smile of someone right in the head, I can see that much. But it's a lot easier on the eyes and the heart than how you were before. Like I said, I'm a real winner. I'm not particularly concerned about putting up appearances here. Call me heartless if you will, you wouldn't be wrong. I'm not gonna pretend I'm some saint, but at the same time, I'm not gonna play like I'm a cackling villain either. There's one thing I don't want people to see though, it's me looking weak. I'm the laid-back guy without a care in the world. That's who I want people to see when they look at me. My big brother was your standard cookie cutter, you can count on me for anything kind of bro. I mean, that ended up not being the case, but he sure looked the part. And Michel. He always looked up to Dee. Went to him for everything. Gave him all his love. Dee was tall and well-built, muscular. Everything about him screamed manly man. I kind of admired that too, though not nearly as much as Michel did. I became a painter in part because I didn't want to follow in my brother's footsteps. Not to say I don't like painting. I love it, but people weren't going to be inclined to compare us as often. I didn't have to be as fit as him, or as good at chess. I had my own thing to be good at. Art. I couldn't beat him at his own game, so I beat him at mine. My whole not a care in the world deal was probably, at least on some level, a shield against having to admit I couldn't compare. If we were a few years further apart, maybe I could have just had the same admiration and respect for him as Michel. There's not much getting past that boyish competitiveness when you're so close in age. I know I've been rambling at you for a while already, but would you mind sticking around a little longer? Great. I've got an old story I'd like to get off my chest. This is something I was planning to take to the grave, and something I don't think Giselle ever needs to know. But well, you say you're not Giselle anymore, and I'm already in the grave, so what the hell? I'm just gonna talk to myself for a bit here, and if you'd kindly forget anything you may overhear, that'd be lovely. Back before I became a painting, I was the head of the Bollinger family. I spent most of my time painting. It really wasn't the job for me though, a guy who half-assed his way straight through life, so I left all the businessy stuff for my wife, Amy. Now she was a real capable girl. If she'd been born a guy, she would have made one heck of a diplomat. Possibly even caught the king's eye. Before we were married, she'd had a bit of a fling with Dee, which she felt real bad about later. Probably didn't help that I had a tendency to bring you up from time to time. Not all the time, just occasionally. That aside, she was a faithful, hard-working partner. It didn't take long for us to become known as the dope and his able bride. To which Amy would always interject, "George is this very capable man, thank you very much." Now that probably makes it sound like I just shoved all the work running the house onto her, but in truth, she wanted the job. She quite enjoyed it, and who was I to complain? It also meant I didn't have to deal with, one of the family's more significant dilemmas. Namely, my mother. Not to be crass, but Mum was not quite all there. She'd always been a bit of a nervous wreck. It didn't take much to set her off, but It was what happened with Michel that finally broke her. Mum had, I guess you could say, a very particular image of what she wanted Michel to be, and he ended up not fitting that image. Now you're probably thinking, that doesn't seem like such a big deal, but it is. I just can't tell you why. Michel has to be the one to tell you. Anyway, some bad stuff went down, and at the end of it all, Mum was constantly hovering over the edge. Dad gave up on her entirely. I just wasn't sure how to approach her, so I kept my distance. Amy was the only one in the family who actively engaged her.
Oh, you see.
While she had betrayed me once, I'd come to trust Amy again. We had a couple of kids, I turned into a doting father, and life was swell. All my problems swept under the rug. Mum's condition, Michel. I left it all to Amy and enjoyed a pleasant, carefree life. But then Giselle, or I guess you're just the maid now, not long after Michel died. My oh my. You really aren't Giselle anymore, huh? So, back to my rambling. Michel died and I got furious at Dee over it. I kept coming back to that. Who really deserved the brunt of the blame in that situation? It's nice and comfy to sit back and do nothing. You can throw blame around all you want. It wasn't your fault after all. You're not the one who killed him, you know? It wasn't long afterwards that Dee died too, killed on the battlefield. I was told he died a very noble death, but I couldn't help but think he was in a hurry to escape. Listening to the news, I kept telling myself, I shouldn't have snapped at him like that. I shouldn't have blamed him. Dee had to choose between protecting Mum or protecting our brother, and he settled on Mum. He was too hard-headed to come up with a way to protect them both. Though even if he had, it was too risky. He served the church directly, and we were all under its thumb. If word spread that one of our own had supposedly sold a soul to the devil, that would be the end of the Bollinger family. I wouldn't have escaped unscathed either. Losing both of my brothers in quick succession crushed me, and as I started breaking down, it was, you guessed it, Amy who comforted me. It is terrible what happened, but it is not your fault. That was around when I began sensing something was off. I mean, she had a thing with Dee. You'd expect she would have been bawling her eyes out right alongside me. So why on earth was she so calm? But I didn't press her on it. I knew I wouldn't get an answer even if I did. And I also didn't have much of a right to question Amy when I was pushing all my problems onto her. Doubly knowing that opening my dumb mouth was what I'd done this to Dee in the first place. Before long, we went back to our normal routine. About 8 years after Michel's death, Mum was gone too, and the Bollinger family was down to me, Amy, and our 2 sons. I'd started teaching the boys how to paint, and I loved every minute of it. Then one day, I started feeling unwell. My fingers would get kinda tingly, such that holding a brush for long periods of time would hurt. Gradually, my time spent both teaching and painting dwindled. Even leaving that manor became difficult. At first, I just thought it was a little strange, nothing to be worried about. And then it started getting real bad, and I'd be stuck in bed for days at a time. We called a doctor to look at me, but he couldn't find anything wrong. Amy said I must be overworking myself, and she made me these nice hearty meals hoping to bring back my energy. Poison, poison. My condition only got worse. Eventually, I started losing my appetite. Amy, she insisted I eat anyway, or I'd never get better. So you know what I did? I tossed out the meals she made me when she wasn't looking. I sent my younger boy out to town to buy me food on secret. And for a while, I ate that instead of Amy's meals, making sure it looked like nothing had changed. After a week or two, the tingling in my fingers started going away. Smart boy. I could only laugh. Laugh and grit my teeth and cry my eyes out. I made a life with this woman, trusted her, and she goes and does this. Anger and sorrow were drowned out by raw heartbreak. My firstborn, he was getting to be about the age he could take over. which is why I'd use my younger son to run errands for me. I couldn't be sure the two weren't working together. Jeez. I was at a total loss. What are you supposed to do when your wife's trying to poison you to a slow death? Even now, I'm not sure what the right course of action in that situation would have been. Maybe I could have banished her, had her punished, but remember, I was only head in name. She handled everything. There was no way I would have been able to pick up the pieces after throwing her out. And if my suspicions were right and my older boy was in on it too, getting rid of Amy wouldn't have solved anything. What then? Spend the rest of my days living in fear of my own family? I was, by that point, worn pretty thin, both physically and emotionally. Every thought led me to the worst possible outcome. I couldn't for the life of me come up with a workable solution. Eventually, I got in my head that it was punishment. I deserved it. Obviously, what Amy was doing wasn't right, but my hands weren't exactly clean either. Maybe Mum could have recovered it if I'd looked after her. Maybe Dee would still be alive if I had put myself in his shoes instead of just snapping at him. Maybe if I'd given everyone the care and attention they deserved, Michel wouldn't have had to die. Burying your head in the sand doesn't absolve you of responsibility. When I finally realized how great a sin inaction was, it was far too late. I'm dumb, short-sighted, and I hated myself for not figuring that out sooner. I should have been stupidly obvious that my action and inaction were doing to the people around me. I should have seen all of this coming. Yeah, Amy had betrayed me, but she wasn't the only one guilty of that. When I was going through Michel's stuff after his death, I came across a painting that had been torn to shreds, that I had made. By refusing to use my head, I had done something that denied his identity, and he left this world carrying the pain that I had caused him. At the time I'd come to that conclusion, I wondered why I was even alive at all. I couldn't blame anyone for wanting me dead. So I started eating Amy's meals again, knowing good and well it would likely kill me. I didn't stop sending my younger boy out though, just not for food. I also strongly encouraged him to move out and become a court artist, protect one of them. Then I started painting again. It was going to be my final piece. Every day the tingling in my hands spread a little farther, my breathing grew a little more laboured. I was afraid I might not finish while I was still able to get out of bed, but somehow managed. It was the most harrowing experience I'd had painting something in my entire life. True to her facade, Amy stayed at my side until my last breath. He held my hand tight, giving me a strange smile. It didn't occur to me at the time, but Amy almost seemed to be smiling, no matter what. In a way, it's kind of impressive how she managed to keep up that loving wife act while simultaneously loading me up with poison. Tell me, Amy, how deep did your poison flow? When you were looking after Mum, did you talk about Michel? Knowing you probably figured out he was still alive. I bet you read his final letter to her. It was you who pushed her to set everything into motion, wasn't it? There were so many things I wanted to say, but I stayed my tongue and made these my parting words. I loved you so much, Amy. If I ask you this, keep my last painting in memory of me. I have no idea if she actually did as I requested, but the last thing I saw before I passed away was her nodding, a smile on her lips. The paint I used to make it, I mixed with a special something I had my younger boy go out and buy for me. A substance that, according to what I was told, slowly dissolves into the air, making it toxic. I had some sort of reaction with the paint as well, turning it almost black. I'm quite proud of how it turned out, if I do say so myself. It was a gorgeous landscape painting. Oh, Georges. You know what? You went out with a bang, at least. Sorry for rambling at you for so long. That's the end of my story. Were you even listening to me? What? You have to go clean the fireplace? Well, alright. Don't let me keep you. Just Please make sure you forget everything by tomorrow, yeah? I'm counting on you. I know, why even say anything, right? I wanted to tell someone, I just don't want anyone to actually know about it. A human heart's a big ball of contradictions like that, you know? You don't? Oh, okay. Well, see ya. It'll be another few decades before you come by again, I imagine. When you do, will it be our first time meeting again? Will you even be able to hear my voice anymore by then? Maybe it'd be better if I forgot everything too. Who knows? So long, maid. And take care. When an angel comes to judge me, how will the scales tilt? Towards forgiveness or towards reckoning? But you know, I don't want it to be an angel who makes that decision. No. You don't have to be an angel. You don't have to be an angel at all. Sure to be my bro. Oh. I really, really hope he got reincarnated. I want to believe. Just, you know, George's is... I feel so bad. It's just that whole situation sucked. He's such an idiot! He's such a moron! But he really does care. He's a dumb, smart idiot. And Didier's also an idiot. They're both dumbasses. Just in different ways. He's the one who needs someone to talk to him directly. Yeah, he's not like he's clearly trying. He's just needs a little push. So I think those first three were all from Requiem, but they moved it over here. These are interesting. I'm enjoying reading these. Although, I think George's one was probably my favorite one of the three so far. Although I have completely forgotten what he sounded like. Let me just, you know what, I'm gonna get into a better position. I feel like he sounded more peppy, but you know what? It's been a while. He's a little tired. Ugh. It's pretty close. I feel like I'm losing everyone's voice except Yuki Masa. Yuki Masa's the only one that's like consistent. Despite how inconsistent he used to be. I'm like, I've been listening to like the previous Fata Morgana like things every so often, just like this moment and this moment, and I've just noticed how different everyone sounds from the beginning. So different. Anyway, let's tackle some more. We have time. It's only 7 p.m. Remember when he was a beast and he almost destroyed my throat? I remember when I could only speak as him by doing this. Like that. Oh, jeez, even trying that. That's how I do the Nopon voices. No, wait. The Nopon and the Lala voices. The Lala voices kill me. That's why I'm stopping doing that now. Lalas are... We can pretend that they sound terrible. Anyway, let's do the Revenant's Dream. Farewell, Jacopo, until our souls cross paths once more in the boundless sphere of fate.
Goodbye, Morgana.
She believed that was the end of it all, that by releasing their souls from the curse, they would all return to their rightful places, that the realm containing the cursed mansion would dissipate, the natural order of the world would take care of the rest. Both she and the good-hearted young man who had guided her to salvation believed that. But the young man underestimated how strong his love was, and the girl underestimated how wholly and thoroughly he blamed himself. He sent her off, and then remained in place. He could not forgive himself for what he had done, and so he did not deserve to move on. The Revenant's dream. The next thing she realized, she was in a field of gold, wheat rolling in the wind like a golden ocean. The sky blue as sapphire, the breeze almost startlingly warm. It was an unbelievably gentle view, and one she did not recognize. She had never seen this place before. Never been there before. Yet looking out at it now, she felt emotional. It was almost terrifyingly beautiful. As if drawn in by it, the girl took a step forward. With each subsequent step, the soft sound of crunching beneath her feet grew more distinct. Evidently, her soul had begun taking physical form, and it was her body from life that the golden ocean created for her. She raised her left arm, which had been severed before she was placed in captivity. It was whole. Still uncertain, she placed a hand on her cheek. There, she found none of the scars or the rough texture of the markings that had caused her so much torment in life. What's going on here? She was perplexed. Where was this place? When was it? And what was she doing here, in that form no less? The girl continued walking in spite of her consternation, in spite of herself at that. It was the gentlest domains that had always caused her the most pain. The most pleasant memories were the sharpest knives. If her life had taught her one thing, it was that. And from then on, she had done everything in her power to eliminate those things. Which was why she had locked the warmly inviting master bedroom in the cursed mansion, and threw the key in the painting. Oh, she did that. But now, she was being drawn into another such realm. She felt as though she needed to push forward, and soon she approached the far edge of the wheat field. She caught sight of a figure. Seeing it, she stopped dead with a gulp. She knew what this world was. It was his world. Much like she had crafted her own realm to contain her curse, he too had built himself a world of illusion. Upon reaching this realization, a flood of images and memories rushed over her, but this was not unusual, as she had experienced projections of others' memories in the cursed mansion as well. The living and the dead perceived the world differently. For while the living were bound by their bodies, the dead were bound by recollections and emotions. Nonetheless, it had been Michel, not her, who had dived into the memories directly. So this was her first time truly experiencing the phenomenon herself, though she was uncertain as to whether the experience was intensified by her own involvement in these specific memories. They were of her as a child, of the young man applying ointment to her face every day for 3 years. She would claim it unnecessary, insult him, complain in any way she could, but still the young man came back the next day. Even on days she fought to the point of truly angering him, he still applied the ointment. He was a strange man, she thought. For what purpose did he pay her so much mind? No other men wanted to get near her. The hideous scars covering her face were quite an effective deterrent. And most would probably cut off their own hands before volunteering to touch them. He alone was different, though. One day, He chastised her for making the trek to the graveyard every day in rain or snow, or anything but in between. But she realized now that his criticism applied to him as well. In the pouring rain or the midst of a blizzard, in wind so strong they could knock a grown man to the ground, or even when he was hurt or sick himself. He never missed a day coming to find her at the graveyard. Next, she saw the rising sun, being carried on his back, traveling a different path home than the one she knew. The stench of decomposing flesh unavoidable in alleys of the slums, her surroundings utterly repugnant, and the sunrise oddly enchanting. Sun's light even reaches this deep, dark corner of the world. I mean, of course it does, but I don't know. For some reason it seems particularly bright today. She said nothing in response, but she felt the same way. She had spent her whole life looking down at her feet, never taking the time to look up and appreciate the sky. She likely never would have either, never been able to see the beauty in the rising sun without a nudge. And subsequently, whenever the evil lord would show himself in her dreams, she was able to close her eyes and block him out. Until eventually, she was no longer able to remember his face or the sound of his voice. Her wounds were at last beginning to heal. He had given her so much, an ordinary life, an ordinary happiness. The freedom from having to be special, and warmth she had never before known. Those memories only served to salt her wounds. Every image of the slave boy showing her kindness was another crack in her foundation. I can't. He killed me. With the same hands he had used to treat her wounds, he later took her life. It tainted all her memories, shattered the illusion of warmth, ruined her all the way down to her soul, turned everything into hatred and anger, a fury so intense that even the young saint's unconditional love was insufficient to assuage it. The only reason she had managed to maintain her composure at the very end was because Michel was there with her, holding her hand. She would not have gone to see him at all otherwise. But now, she was alone. So she would leave. She had no interest in seeing that man again, and when she made to head back the way she had come, she caught a glance at the shadowy figure's condition. It was beaten and broken, crumbling away. She looked down in silence on the shadow, which barely maintained its own form. She had seen souls decay in the state before, such as Michel when he arrived at the mansion after centuries lost, broken down and reformed again and again, with only Giselle's voice as his guide. By the time he found his way there, he was unrecognizable, hardly a wisp of a spirit, incapable of an individual thought, blindly following Giselle's lead. She understood why Michel's soul had taken so much damage. He had been abused, mistreated to an unimaginable degree his entire life. It made sense that he would wish for an ending more permanent than even death. But him... what are you doing so broken? She could not understand what had brought him to this point. He was the perpetrator, a monster. No matter how kind he had been to her before, that did not change what he had done after that. So what did he think he was doing, looking so mangled and beaten? If she left him there, before long, his soul would disappear for good. Rubbed out of existence, never to return to the boundless sphere of fate. Good. Let him. She bit her lip. Yes, let him. Then she would be free of his torture once and for all. She would never have to see him again, never have to torment herself with thoughts of him. And what a relief that would be. So she tried to turn back, but her body would not let her. An emotion she did not understand had welled up in her breast. It was pity, though she could not put a name to it herself. It was an emotion she had never felt during her time as the witch. And in fact, were the witch here, she would have cackled joyously at the sight, pointing a skeletal finger at the pathetic thing he had become and telling him how much he deserved it. But she was no longer that witch, and furthermore, she had been blessed with unconditional love by Michel and Giselle. The benevolent portion of her soul, which she had rent from herself to create the white-haired girl, was beginning to return to its rightful place. She thought she had heard a voice from within, telling her that only she could save him. She frowned. Why should she have to save him after all the pain and suffering he had caused her? The voice within spoke. Michel had stepped forward to save her after all the pain and suffering she had put him through. Giselle too held no grudge after being imprisoned in the mansion by her for centuries, happily joining Michel on his quest. She took a single step forward. The wheat swayed as she did, making the scene even more dreamlike. Initially, she'd been irritated to find him here, trying to hide from his sins in this realm of illusion. But now, she was beginning to realize that was not the case. His memories and feelings flowed over her, with more clarity this time. This was what he could have had if he had not made all those mistakes. This was the place he had hoped to show her one day. He was not hiding from his sins. He was attempting to atone for them. He had condemned his sins, lamented his failures, and forced himself to look at this vision of the world he had let slip through his fingers. Again and again, until it had destroyed his soul. This was his punishment for himself. Not only for what he had done to Morgana, but her other half, the white-haired girl as well. It said in a letter that she had wished to see his homeland, and he had failed to see that through as well. Twice he had broken what he had supposed to care about most. Twice he had crushed her. And he could never forgive himself for that. Not even after she had released him from her curse. You truly are the biggest fool in all the world. She had never in all her time seen more of a disaster of a man, though she was beginning to realize that part of the reason he had done this to himself was because she had rejected his offer to make amends. Told him she would not punish him any further. Not to mention, he was not entirely at fault for his actions in his second life. She had wished to see his life in ruins. She had, in a sense, placed him on that path herself. But he was not the one who could place the blame for his actions on others. Everything was always his responsibility, and his alone. He was like that in his first life, and his second, and in the illusory alternate scenario where Michel intervened. Ultimately, I'm the one responsible, he said on their march to atonement. And I suppose, to make sure their lives go a little better, he said, excluding himself from any potential redemption. So what though? That doesn't change what he did. Are you saying I should have sent him off with a smile? That I should have set aside my hatred to make the man who hurt me feel better? She took another step toward the amorphous shadow, still unsure of her own position. I don't think that would have made him feel better. Personally. The closer she got, the more she wanted to run away. What would she say? What would she do? She had not an inkling of an idea. Not a single fully formed thought about what came after this. The shade noticed her, lifting its head. She tensed up. It was hideous, hardly even recognizable as human. But she could tell somehow that it was smiling at her. It must have been made up of all the things he had wanted to do for her, she thought. The shade seemed to think she was part of the illusion. In that case, she thought, in that case, she could just play along with it, pretending she was another phantom in this dreamscape would reduce the pressure on her. giving her time to think. Though in truth, she likely wanted to indulge in that fantasy herself. The long-lost possibility of nothing gone wrong, of him finding their homeland, even knowing it was all a sham, an insignificant sliver of a dream. She probably still wanted to partake in its warmth. And maybe then, she would be able to give him a genuine smile.
So, what's on the agenda for the day?
Initially, she only intended to play along with the illusion, but in time, she found herself being drawn into the dream world as well. A fantasy where he had never become the Lord, she never the witch, and both of them lived uneventful lives in their undiscovered homeland. It was pleasant and peaceful, and she soon began enjoying it in earnest. She had turned off her mind, simply starting to accepting things as they happened, which she was only able to do because he was hardly recognizable as him. She felt like she had really gone back to being a 16-year-old girl, like she had grown up a normal life, not filled with tragedy. And oh, how wonderful that would have been if it could have been true. He asked her to sing for him, so she brought him into the shade of a large tree. He told her he had borrowed a lute, but he had nothing in his amorphous hands, so she merely played along. In his vision of this realm, there were others like us for him to borrow from. They sat down in the shade of the tree and sang, only her voice to carry the tune. Like Michel in the same condition, the shade was barely able to produce any coherent sound, let alone music. But still, she could tell what he was trying to say and how he was saying it. The longer she spent in the realm of illusion, the more her own state of mind reverted to those days. The 3 years when she had been able to experience happiness like anyone else, but continuing until she reached the age of 16. She was smiling and laughing, though she hardly realized it herself. Nor did she recall that she had explicitly told him previously that she could not smile for him. In time, she even found herself able to speak of her younger days, something she had not told him even in life. How she was known as a saint. How her blood had miraculous powers, and the people of her village began worshipping her for it. She had on some level wanted to talk about that with him in life. Wanted to open herself up to him more. Wanted him to know more about who she really was. "You're just an ordinary girl." He spoke in an unearthly voice, like thousands of rocks scraping against one another. But to her ears, it was the sound of the young slave man's voice. His slightly exasperated, always gentle tone. She smiled.
You've said as much so many times now, I'm almost beginning to believe it.
She said, wondering if he would have been the one to give her the warmth if things had gone differently. Obviously, that was but a hypothetical future, one they could have never reached, no less. But she had softened up enough to entertain such silly fantasies. She also thought about her homeland, not the small isolated village where she had been born, but someplace farther up her bloodline, her real father's home. Would you like to meet him? She was telling him of her father when he suddenly asked her that. She was not sure, and she racked her brain in consideration. It was not something she really needed to think about. There was no family here for her to find anymore, after all, but she had indulged herself so deeply in the past that reality was not a concern. She spoke of her father with a hint of sadness in her voice, to which the shade responded with a sudden surge of rage. The whole dreamscape warped around him. The metallic smell of blood permeated the region. He wanted to seek out her father and mete out divine justice. The world twisted to fit his image.
Any form of violence is forbidden,
she shouted, attempting to calm his fury. Not even if it's for my sake, she continued. Anytime he had managed to obtain any form of power, it had led him down the path of destruction. He knew no other way to wield it.
and because doing so had shown to be effective in accomplishing his immediate goals, he had never bothered to look for any other solutions, which ultimately resulted in him being unable to trust anyone, because he only understood power as a blunt object. He was a soft, cowardly man deep down, but because he had learned to kill.
I don't want you to hurt anyone else, ever again.
The more he hurt others, the more he hurt himself. This was a lesson that was long, long overdue for him. The shadows stared at her in silence for several minutes, as the blood and fiery rage twisted the illusory realm slowly receded. When it was gone, the shade too seemed to have returned to normal, nodding and saying, "All right, I won't." She let out a sigh of relief. She had slipped entirely back into her childhood. They talked more about everything and nothing, such as the Midsummer Festival, the memory of which filled her with a yearning for those times, when everyone was still together, him, his friend Maria, his companion Gratian, and the eternally cheerful Jaren. She was never terribly fond of gatherings of that many people. That had not changed even now, but she was able to reminisce about it and admit that it had not been entirely awful. That it had been an important formative moment of her youth, and probably the same for the rest of them as well. The three girls holding hands and dancing in a circle, him playing a tune on the lute, and his friend providing a beat. It was a marvelous day. As she reflected, she realized he had been chasing overly ambitious dreams from the very beginning. All his talk of going out into the world, of taking her with him, he was no different here in this realm of illusion. Eventually, she grew tired of hearing his fantasies telling him, "Climb down off your high horse and adjust." If he was going to keep chasing after stupid dreams, she would laugh at him every time. If he was going to keep chasing after impossible ideals, she would drag him back down to earth. That way, he would never. And I'll just have to find a new dream.
Excuse me?
Her mouth hung open in a mix of exasperation and shock, and perhaps a trace of anger. She wanted to shout, tell him how all his idiotic dreams ended with him in shambles. But he seemed unable to pick up on her trepidation, continuing unfazed. "I'm gonna win your heart." She stood aghast. That was the last thing she ever expected to hear from him, even knowing this whole world was his fantasy about what he wished he could have done for her. She was conflicted. She felt many things, but flattered was a line she would never cross. No matter how many times she had reverted to her younger self here, her present self still remained. "You murdered me. There's nothing you can do to win my heart, not a single thing." She found herself very close to saying what she felt, but she set her agitation aside to let the dream continue a bit longer. For her own peace of mind more than his. From that point, he became almost impressively brazen, even asking her to call him by his name, to which she frowned and said in no uncertain terms, "Why would I waste my breath?" Visibly disheartening him. After some time having to watch him mope, she could bear it no longer, and attempted to raise a new subject. But whether she asked him about learning to play the lute or going fishing together, the only response she received was a half-hearted nod. She sighed, at a complete loss. Then the shadow spoke. "Will you say my name?" Again. Why was he so fixated on such a stupid, insignificant thing? But as he continued, she realized. His request was more pitiful and heartfelt than she had ever heard from him. "I don't want you to forget," she gasped. "I don't want you to forget me again." Cracks developed in the shadow. "I don't want you to forget what I look like." It wavered, shook, crumbled. The sound of my voice. But still, he pleaded desperately. or how I feel about you. The man who refused to lean on anyone was begging for her validation. I don't want you to forget what we talked about. They were all things she had long since forgotten about him. What kind of man I was. Things she had locked away in the deepest recesses of her mind. Nor all the time we shared together. Memories overflowing with so much warmth they hurt. Lise. She cast it all out, his name, his face, his everything. Don't forget me. Which was what had allowed her to mistake him for the Lord. She felt a chill listening to the shade beg and plead endlessly. What was she supposed to do here? At the very least, this was meant the end of the peaceful, trouble-free illusion. Why would you ask me that now? She said, her voice strained. I was hoping to. She was hoping to bask in the illusion a while longer. The shadow said nothing. It simply sat there, waiting for her answer. She mulled over the question for a while, then took another step toward it. She was close enough to touch it now. She would never do that. A feeling welled up in her breast, a mixture of wanting to scream, burst into tears, throw things around like a small child. She forced it back, looking down at the shade. I had remembered. Would anything have been any different? Could we have not ended up so far down the wrong path? If I'd gone and found you, would that have stopped you from becoming what you did? There were 1,000 things she could have done differently. If after taking up the cottage on the lake, she had gone into town even once, she could have found out that they had a new lord. Maybe he was the one who had sent the knights to visit her cottage, who she had sent away without talking to, not to mention. If she had only told him about her childhood, the rumors about her blood having healing powers, he would have been able to make the connection between her and the lakeside witch. She had done something. Maybe she could have stopped him from veering off the straight and narrow. In fact, she was likely the only person who could have stopped him. Why am I blaming myself for his mistakes? He's the one responsible for his choices. She did not know what to do. She had been at a loss ever since learning the truth. The answers had only brought her more pain, and so she buried them away somewhere far out of sight. Ah, that must be why. That must have been why she had not returned to her rightful place. While she had been brought unto salvation by the hands of an angel, ceased being the witch, the girl inside was as wounded and suffering as ever. May I hold your hand? The shade resumed his pleading. Its desperation clawed at her chest. And so, rather than coldly denying the request, she found herself saying, "Do as you please." The shadow slowly extended its hand up to hers, as if scared. It was not playing its part very well. This was supposed to be a dream where nothing had gone wrong between them after all. But the illusion had begun to give away the harsh reality. The reality of having murdered the girl he loved. The reality of having been brutally abused and killed by the man she had leaned on for support. They had both once cared for each other in a very similar way, yet the end result was not love, but a terrible tragedy. He was terrified to show someone affection with hands that had only ever brought destruction. And so before he did, he said, "I promised I wouldn't touch you without permission." She knew it was just an excuse, though, that he was simply afraid, worried about putting his bloodied hands on her. That he might hurt her again, that he might corrupt her, that he had no right to. But he overcame all that, gently placing his arms around her, as if he had been waiting centuries for this moment. It was an embrace of many things: love for her, deep regret, and most of all, atonement. He wanted to do this. In his arms, she could feel everything he felt, since the day I locked his soul in that mansion. She thought back to that time, The unfathomable amount of time she spent as a witch, a force of pure hatred and vengeance. His was the last soul she entrapped, and when she did, he was little more than an amorphous shadow. It took many, many years for him to regain a human form, but even then, he was unable to move or speak. He simply wailed something incomprehensible at her, again and again. At the time, I thought he was saying how much he hated me, but she was wrong. He had simply wanted to atone, but he had no idea how.
Look at you, a grown man shaking like a fawn.
As the shadow embraced her, it trembled, sobbing loudly into her shoulder. She had never seen him cry before, though she was unsure if this counted, since she could only feel it through the nebulous shade.
Sometimes I can't tell if you have a heart of stone or of glass.
Her entire body went limp. All the tension in her nerves released at once, and she felt like a massive weight had been lifted from her shoulders.
Though I suppose I'm not terribly different in that regard.
Unable to even speak my heart unless there's no one else around.
Unable to face you except through this childish fantasy. Not even able to show any vulnerability.
Maybe. She hated to even entertain the thought. But perhaps they were more similar than she wanted to admit. Sometime long ago, when the memory she had vanished away, he told her that being close made people more open with each other. And it turned out he was right about that. She began to speak, to tell him the truth of how she felt, letting spill forth the raw pain within, holding nothing back. She told him how she despised him more than anything in the world, because he showed her happiness, then the depths of despair. That she had no idea what to do with him, how she did regret some of her actions, such as misdirecting her anger. He was consumed by regret over what he had done to her, but he was not the only one who had regrets. As the minds and spirits intermingled, the true shape of her wounds grew apparent. He had hurt her, but she had hurt him too. She had blamed him not only for his own sins, but the sins of another man as well, and for that she had laughed at him, cursed him, mocked him for trying to show something resembling care for another human being. Again and again and again and again and again.
I should have known better than anyone how much he was capable of caring, though.
She thought back to the decisive moment. Knowing the truth now, she finally understood the full effect of the things she had said, to an even greater degree than Michel had told her. She had told the man who had spent 3 years looking after her, coming to apply ointment to her scarred face, rain or snow, that she despised him with all her soul, that he had ruined her life. She had not been seeing clearly at the time, but he had been teetering on the edge as well, and her saying that had been the final push.
It was my words that ultimately pushed you over the edge, wasn't it?
How had it all ended up like this? Why did they have to hurt each other so much? What was the turning point that sent them so far off the path? He continued holding on to her for some time, pleading for a chance to make amends. Spilling his heart, clinging to her like a little child. It was something he could have never done in life, or even in death. It was only after repeatedly crushing himself beneath overwhelming regret that he was mangled and hardly recognizable, that he was able to show her his weakness, that he was able to show her his tears. But it was far too late. It was all over. Nothing he had asked for was something she could give him. No matter how much he begged, she could never stop hating him, could never forgive him. Fissures began to form in her spirit. Memories of her youth brought with them emotions long lost, of the time she first directly acknowledged his kindness. It was bitter, sweet, agonizing, suffocating, innocent feeling.
Many, many years ago, when I was still a child, I looked up to you. The sunrise she saw that morning carried on his back only seemed as beautiful as it did because he had shown it to her. She then grew to yearn the lost homeland he spoke of, admire his lofty dreams, and feel warmth in his hands as he spread the ointment. That was when the seed was planted, not only of the ability to feel joy, but love as well. I might have even had some fondness for you. And having said that, she noticed the clear droplets rolling down her cheeks. Lorix. After Michel finished unveiling the truth, she shouted, I cried for him in a frenzy, and those tears she had shed contained all her feelings for him. On the day of her 12th birthday, that terrible tragic day, she cried and told the man in the slave cart, I'm sad because I didn't get the chance to show my gratitude to the people very dear to me. And that was true. She was grateful to not only the young slave men, but the girls of the brothel as well. She had wanted to open up to them, but the larger portion of her tears were just for one person. She cried for him. She cried for the man who had spent so long trying to help her. She cried because she had not been able to thank him. She cried because she believed him to be dead. She cried for him then. So who did she cry for now? Were these tears for him as well? Were they for herself? No. They were for both of them. She decided to let the illusion continue on a while longer. She knew it was foolish. She had mixed feelings about being here and interacting with him, as she had when she was younger. But she had softened up enough to not simply ignore the warmth it also made her feel. She had found it in herself to accept the seed of kindness sprouting within her. She had found it in herself to acknowledge how he felt. So she would use the dream to lead him to his next destination, under the guise of him holding her hand and leading her, out of the claw of this foolish fantasy, to be released once and for all. She would guide him back into the void, that boundless sphere of fate, so that he may live again. They set off through the fields of waving gold. She squeezed her eyes shut, envisioning the young man she once knew, and when she opened them again, he was there, holding her hand and smiling softly at her. You know, Jacopo, I really hope we don't ever cross paths again. Nothing good could possibly come from us meeting in the next life. I'm tired of having to deal with you. I hate you. And I pray I never have to see you again. But should you wish to see me, and should that wish take priority over my own, promise you'll treat me well. And if you can manage that, then Fin. Holding it back that whole time. Morgana. She's such an... I love her so much. I know the second the music started, the second I saw that tree, I was like, no. Come on. I think that's a great note to end on, you know? Let's this music on. Leave this over here. And on a nice calm note. I think that was the longest one so far. I think that took almost a full hour. It was worth it. That was really lovely. And it explains so much more of what went on in that scene. Like how she was so accepting all of a sudden. Oh god, I love that about this so much. You know, like... They go into so much depth in everything. They go into so much depth in everyone's feelings. It's so good. It makes me really feel for them so much. Ugh, I love this. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna go be by myself.
also getting real hot down here, so go to my room where I have a fan and just cool off. Man, these short stories are nice. I'm glad we still have some time, some like more Fata Morganas to go through because holy crap, I'm not ready to put this game away. But yeah, thanks for joining me on this journey, Flint. It's always a pleasure. We'll always carry it. Yeah. There's always art. There's always art. I can live through fan art. Oh man, I'm gonna feel such a void when I'm done with this. Such a void. Anyway, I'll leave. I'll leave now and just stuff my head in a pillow. It's fine. I'm fine. Bye-bye.